Good evening, my name is Kyle and welcome to my channel where we take culture, TV, and movies and filter them right. And in this episode of Informal, which is the first Informal for April, this is April 3rd by the way, we're going to talk about a few things that I brought up that I thought you would find interesting. We're going to talk about Chris Matthews and some of his comments concerning the 2020 election. We're going to talk about Isaiah Washington and his appearance at the White House for the president's prison reform meeting. I'm going to talk about Joe Biden and some of the things that he's having a problem with. I mentioned him before because he actually is a white man, and that's going to be very difficult from an identity politics standpoint to be viable in the climate that the party that he's with, the Democrats, has put him in. And lastly, we're going to talk about the Disney lawsuit, which is coming up concerning a potential pay gap discrimination suit, class action. And so that's what we're going to talk about. But really quickly, just want to say that this weekend was awesome for me. I went to Gettysburg. I go fairly frequently. I do some tours. But this time I did some stock footage, filming, and I also did some stuff dealing with a Patreon video that I did, which I'll talk about a little bit later in a different video, and also dealing with the 1,000 subscribers that we hit a couple weeks ago and how much I'm so appreciative of that. And so check those out. As well, I did a video on the movie Unplanned. I'm putting up a review on Dumbo and Watership Down as well, a Netflix show that was told to me by a subscriber. She suggested that I look at it, and I did, and I want to talk about it. It's a pretty epic show, and I want to talk about the social implications of that in terms of how it relates to us today as people, because it's involving rabbits of all things. So anyway, so with that, let's just jump right in, and we're going to talk about Chris Matthews here. And so essentially what Chris Matthews said, he's a pundit on MSNBC, and his show is called Hardball. And I'm just going to read what he says here, and I find it very fascinating. So what he says here, he says that the Democratic Party is lurching so far leftward these days, the Hardball host says, it's risking its own failure in 2020. He goes on and says, Chris Matthews, the host of MSNBC's Hardball, has a different feeling running down his leg these days, one of dread. Matthews warned the Democrat Party that is being pulled so far to the left by freshman Congresswoman and radical socialists that President Trump could win re-election by a landslide. Okay, he goes on to say, the article goes on to say, this is basically LifeZet site here. It says, following a rundown of today's progressive agenda, such extreme measures as abolishing the Electoral College, supporting late-term or post-birth abortions, and advocating for open borders, Matthews wondered how it will play out with voters in key swing states. He then foresaw gloom and doom for the party, just as in 1972 when the party went hard to the left with Democrat nominee George McGovern. He says, everyone enjoyed themselves. The convention was giddy with excitement, even if not well organized. He recalled, right up to until the Democrats lost 49 states that year with Richard Nixon, who not only carried the Electoral College, losing only Massachusetts and D.C., but 60% of the popular vote. Matthews concluded by explaining this rationale that a majority of America is not in line with radical leftist agenda. These are facts to consider, he explained. One, almost half the Democrat Party electorate is either moderate or conservative. In other words, to the right of the progressives. And so what he's basically saying, and I tend to agree with him, what Chris Matthews is saying is this. And what I've been saying, and one of the reasons why this channel exists, and one of the reasons why so many other channels like Midnight's Edge, Geeks and Gamers, Nerdrotic, Odin's Movie Blog, That Star Wars Girl, and I can name a few others out there that are just blowing up because the opportunity to create content based on what's going on in the media and in the social fabric of society is just insane. I mean, things that you would think are common sense are just being ignored, ridiculed, and thrown out the window. And that just leads to several things. It leaves the opportunity for people like me to basically come out and say, hey, hello, this is not reality. This is not what we're thinking. And number two, it creates a vacuum politically for someone else to come in and take that position. And so whenever you have one party who has built their entire base on blue collar, labor, school, hardworking people, when that leaves that particular group of people and goes to the opponents, the opposing party, that's a bad thing. And what we're finding is that because of the party is moving so far to the left, outside of the common sense mainstream area, there's a vacuum there. And it's just a matter of a libertarian to come in, a Republican to come in, a Green Party to come in. And you see people like even Bernie Sanders is taking some more conservative positions when it comes to international trade and some other things. And so it's leaving a fraction within the party, and it's leaving people like Joe Biden, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, in a bind. And when you're telling that if you're a white male and you are basically being told that you don't understand life because you are a you are a part of a class of people who have been oppressing everybody, then all of a sudden it makes your job very, very difficult. You have people like Beto O'Rourke, who now, O'Rourke, okay, he's Hispanic, okay, yeah. So you have some people like him identifying as one thing. You have people like Elizabeth Warren identifying as something else outside of their own specific obvious race. And so, and when you play that identity politics game, you get into that stuff. You get into that craziness. You're talking against yourself. You're fighting against yourself. Your party's fighting against you because everyone's basically squabbling over the real estate that only exists there at that small center left position. Everything left of that is not going to be an effective place to win any kind of national campaign. But it's that far left side of that party that is the loudest, the most vehement, and it's what the MSN or mainstream media is really latching on to. And with that, it makes it very difficult to combat that when you come into a situation when they are sucking up all the oxygen in the room. And so that's the dilemma for the Democrats. It'd be very interesting to see what happens with this party, what happens with this in general. I'm hoping that this thing sort of falls apart for them, not necessarily because I'm wanting, one party to win. I do, and it's not the Democrats, by the way, if you haven't known already. But maybe it's because I also want them to start coming more to the middle with these positions. Maybe the mainstream media will come off this stick, realize it doesn't work, and we'll get back into some normal common sense and logic and reason in our everyday politics, sports, television, pop culture, movies, and so forth. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's get into the next topic here, and it kind of relates to a little bit. I'm going to talk more about the identity politics when we get to Joe Biden. But so the next thing I want to talk about is Isaiah Washington. Okay, let me set this thing up. Okay, first of all, Isaiah Washington is an actor who was on Grey's Anatomy for many, many years in the early goings of the show. I used to watch Grey's Anatomy when it first came out. I'm not sure when it was. I think it was early 2000s, I think. It's been out a long time. And it was a pretty good show, I guess. I watched the first 2 seasons. It kind of jumped the shark after the second season. I stopped watching it. But nevertheless, that's neither here nor there. So on April 1st, the president had a reception for his First Step Act, which is a prison reform bill, which was signed and passed, which basically gives people a second chance to get back into the workforce based on, I'm not sure what the program is based on. You have to qualify as some sort, but people who have been in jail for a period of time that was outside the norm or the fairness. For instance, if you're in jail for 40 years for half of a bag of weed, I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying stuff like that. People are getting a second look and being able to have their sentence shortened and come out so they can go into the workforce and help with our society, help with America. And so the president invited a lot of people. I know his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was there. He was a big orchestrator for this. Van Jones, on the other side of the table, was also a big organizer in this. And he brought people to the White House of different, because it was definitely a bipartisan bill. One of the rare things you see today. But he brought people from both sides of the political spectrum to the White House to have a reception. And the ceremony, I just kind of caught it just happenstance, where he had behind him some people who were recipients of this particular program. And you see the person here, I'm forgetting her name, forgive me, but this person here was talking with Kim Kardashian, I believe, and she petitioned the president to get her to be released. She was involved in a drug trade way back in the day, and I just forget her name. I'm sorry. I didn't really prep this one pretty much that well, but that's not the point I'm trying to say anyway, so it doesn't matter. But she was a recipient of that, and several people were there. This gentleman here was pretty cool. He basically shouted out. He was happy about this whole thing, and it was just a really cool ceremony, and I just didn't see the mainstream media really covering it. And so, but anyway, let me get to the point here with Isaiah Washington. So he's in the crowd, and so he tweets this. Let me show you what he tweets. He tweets this. He says, Isaiah Washington, I voted for 44, that's Obama, twice. I even checked my emails in the Senate office while lobbying for Salone to be given another chance to rebrand. Not once in 8 years was I given any support regarding Africa or the black agenda, but 45, Trump, invites me to the White House to celebrate the First Step Act. And so Isaiah Washington has, if you don't know him, he got into a little controversy way back. You can go look him up. I'm not going to mention it. But he's very outspoken, and he wears his emotions on the sleeve. But he really caught the attention of a lot of people because he's bringing up things that we've been saying for a long time. And that is, when you call the president a racist or so forth, okay, to me, you got to back that up. And I haven't seen anything really concrete at all to even remotely back that up. It's always emotion. It's always misrepresented stuff. And when you see stuff like this, you would think that people who were calling him one thing would at least acknowledge the fact that he's trying to do something, if they did believe that. Well, I think Isaiah Washington, and many people for that matter, are seeing this and are just saying, you know what, where was Obama on a lot of this stuff? And Trump, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion, is doing what he can to help. I'm going to do a video specifically on this. I'm not going to talk about this specifically, but what he has done for the black community, specifically. I could talk about Latinos and Asian Americans and women, but I'm going to just concentrate this one video on blacks and what's going on with that, and I'm going to kind of go into more detail. But I think I think very poignant that he would say that and come out. But I think he's just telling the truth. I think he's just doing that, and I think he's seeing progress. And so that was his opinion on the matter, and you can take that for what you will. But if you go back and look at Obama's record as a state senator in Illinois, look for yourself. See what he's done. Look what he's done as a community organizer. What has he really done for the black community? I'd be curious to know exactly, and because I haven't seen really one thing that he's done. So I'd be curious. If you know of anything, comment below. I'll be interested to know, and I will talk about it. Okay, so Joe Biden. Okay, now as we all know, Joe is a person who's a charismatic guy. He does a lot of touchy-feely things. I'm not going to talk about that so much because that's between him and his accusers and whatever. I think we need to be consistent when we talk about people who are accused of things, whether or not that's a due process involved in that. I think that should be adhered to. But the fact of the matter is, I think we have a lot of video and images of Joe and Mr. Biden, and I just, that makes his job a little more difficult. But my last informal, I talked about Joe Biden. I basically was saying, you know what, as a white man, he has a hard time. He's going to have a hard time because the Democrat Party does not like, well, they're denigrating white men, but the fact of the matter is Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden are really their best shots, in my opinion, of, first of all, gaining the nomination and then potentially beating Trump. And so here's the thing with this. with the Joe Biden situation and the Brett Kavanaugh, the left are falling all over themselves to find a narrative of how to deal with this. So the AP has an article here that I'm going to go over real quickly. And they're basically saying here that the title of the thing says, this is from Entertainment. No, who is this from? This is from Associated Press. Okay, he hugs everybody. Women divided over defense of Biden. Let's check this out. It's simply a human touch. He is a warm, affectionate person. He hugs everybody. In the days since allegations surfaced of uninvited touching on the part of Joe Biden, several women in politics and beyond have been coming to his defense, vouching for his character and saying it was merely his old-fashioned tactile style at issue. Nothing intentional and certainly nothing sexual. But the nature of the defense coming frequently, but not exclusively, from older women, as well as Biden's own assertion that he never felt he was acting inappropriately, raises some uncomfortable questions. Chief among them, if Biden really had no idea what he was doing, is he simply too out of step to be his party's standard bearer in the Me Too era? There's a bit of not getting it when it comes to gender story here, said Debbie Walsh, director of the Center for American Women and Politics. To me, there's been a patronizing quality to this, an alpha male asserting himself physically that I think is problematic for him. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Okay, so here's the thing. Again, I'm not really getting into what he did or what he's doing. And I'm not getting into that because that's between him and his victims and whatever. The point I want to make here, I want you to hear me clearly on this, is the fact that when it came to Brett Kavanaugh, it was believe all women, okay, no matter what. And with Biden, it's, well, he's just being affectionate, whatever, not necessarily believe all women. And so I'm hearing factions of the people who support Biden having a hard time with this because they were one way with Brett Kavanaugh and the one way with Joe Biden. It ekes with hypocrisy. And so there's no way out for them on this one. They're just going to have to eat it and have to basically suck it up and basically hope the story dies down. Ultimately, I don't think anything's going to come out of this. I think Joe Biden is too powerful of a person. Him being vice president under Obama, who is still a very popular figure. Him being a very capable person to potentially beat Trump in terms of a general election. In my opinion, more so than maybe even a Bernie Sanders, because I think Joe compliments Trump in a lot of ways. I don't think Biden will beat Trump, but he's a better option, in my opinion, even than Bernie Sanders. Given those reasons, I don't think this is going to affect him. I think he'll get through this situation. He's a political juggernaut in terms of his experience and his whatever. But when he went back and started doing apologizing for the Anita Hill and apologizing for other things, he's trying to dumb down. And here's the problem what Biden has. Okay, because he did the apology tour last week, because with Anita Hill and some other things, and now he's apologizing with his inappropriate touching and affection, whatever. All of this is going to make his character, what makes Joe Biden a very capable person in terms of going against Trump, because he's kind of brazen and off the cuff and says crazy things and personality, whatever. And he basically, when he went against Ryan in the vice president debate, oh my goodness, when McCain was running, it was McCain and Ryan, Biden destroyed him. He was incredible in that debate. I mean, we thought that, was it Paul Ryan? I think they thought that he would just crush Biden. But Biden, I mean, goodness, he just he beat him down like a drum. And so, yeah, he's very capable. So I don't think Biden's going to be affected by this. But again, this is just a point that I'm trying to make of the hypocrisy and what happens when you play the game of identity politics. It always bites you because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And I have a video. I'm going to keep plugging myself, but I have a video that I'm going to put up here on that as well. And how that is just doesn't make any sense, and how you can quantify it and talk to someone who is making this position and tell them without a shadow of a doubt, this is why what you're saying doesn't make sense, and here's how we can fix it. Okay. All right. So where are we at? All right. So let's go next one. All right. So Disney lawsuit. So okay. So I talked about Captain Marvel a bunch. And just to rehash a little bit, Captain Marvel just crossed $1 billion today. I think it was today or yesterday. And in part, big part of that is because Endgame, Avengers Endgame, is just a phenom. It broke the record for pre-sales in like a couple of hours. It broke the Force Awakens pre-sale record. And people just want to see this film. And so when you put Captain Marvel at the end of the part one, Avengers Infinity War, make her an integral part in that. After what happens, I'm not going to give you spoilers in case you guys haven't seen it yet. I don't know what planet you've been on. But make her an integral part in that. For the next movie, which is Endgame, people just can't get enough of this. So yes, Captain Marvel is going to do well. It's going to be $1 billion. And they protected the movie very, very well. Kudos to you guys. And so, but here's the thing. Okay, they protected Captain Marvel so much. I find it, again, pretty ironic that they're pushing the female lead characters, which is awesome. I'm totally for that. Hear me, okay? I'm all for that. It's not a big deal. But when you tell someone, because they have an opinion against it, that all of a sudden they are homophobic, or they're racist, or they're xenophobic, or they're anti-feminist, or they are misogynistic, or they're anti-woman, or whatever, or they're just evil person, because you have a differing opinion, because you don't like the movie, or you don't like the actress saying stuff about you, like when she says this movie is not made for you. And when people say, well, I don't like that, and so by us responding to a comment directed at them, or I wasn't a white male, so I can't say, but I mean, I'm saying, metaphorically, when a comment's made at me and I can't respond back to that, because if I do, I'm going to be called a racist or a homophobic or a sexist or misogynistic or whatever. That's why people didn't like it. And that's why the whole thing happened. It wasn't about Captain Marvel being what it is. It was about it turning into an anti-man feminist movie, and that if you don't agree with it, then you're going to be pretty much shut down. Rotten Tomato scores, being deleted, 54,000 reviews, legitimate reviews, being removed from the scores to keep it at a higher rate than what it was. And so all of this stuff, paying, all this money for this and the promotion and everything else. Now you have a situation now where Disney is now looking at a class action lawsuit for what? Gender pay gap, gender pay gap. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the article. I haven't really prepped for this. This is one of the last things I added to it. But I'm going to read our first couple of chapters in this, or first couple of paragraphs on this. This is Variety. It says a class action lawsuit. This is from yesterday, I believe. This is from the 2nd, yes. So a class action lawsuit. Okay, a class action law firm sued the Walt Disney Company on Tuesday, alleging that the company systematically underpays its female employees. The firm of Andrus Anderson LLP, based in San Francisco, seeks to represent all women employed by the Walt Disney Studios in California since 2015. The suit claims that corporate policies, including setting a new hire salary based on her salary at previous employers, has a discriminatory effect on women. The suit also alleges that Disney does not have an internal mechanism to ensure that women are not paid less than their male counterparts for the same work. Like other companies that operate without transparency, consistency, and accountability, Disney's leadership tends to value male workers more than female workers, the suit alleges. Taken together, Disney's compensation policies, procedures, and practices are not valid, job-related, or justified by business necessity. All right, so with this, there's not much more to say on this, but you had, again, the timing of this is just, you just gotta say, whatever, man. That the fact that they push this, and they're pushing pro-women roles. They're saying that if you don't agree with us making Captain Marvel, or for that matter, Disney, let's say Rey or any of the characters they're trying to push forth, some call them Mary Sue's. If you don't put forth our agenda of putting forth these super powerful women who can't do anything wrong, who are going to drive this narrative down your throat. If you don't like it, you're going to be considered a misogynistic, anti-woman, anti-feminist person. You're lower than the scum of the earth, and if you don't agree with that, then that's what you are. And so, but then again, they're being accused, of course, this is all alleged, of having a gender pay in their corporate offices. I believe it's in the California area. It doesn't say exactly what part of Disney we're talking about. So, I don't know. I mean, we'll see what comes out of this. But I just think, again, the whole theme of this particular episode and the whole theme of my channel is basically when you get involved in this identity politics stuff, when you get involved in this social justice warrior stuff, when you get involved with saying that you as an individual don't matter. If you're a black person, you don't matter. You only matter if you fall within a black group within this particular section. I'm sorry. If you're a person, it doesn't mean if you're a person who likes comic books, you can't be a person who likes comic books. You have to be a person who represents all the comic book people. And so if one comic book person doesn't like it, you're lumped in that category and you're treated as that person, because the identity of a comic book people are fat, white males who sit in the basement and eat paste and watch video games and watch and read comic books. That's the perception, and that's how you're labeled, not as you are as a person. And that's the problem with identity politics, because once you do that, you find exceptions, and if you find that this doesn't make any sense, and then you end up eating your own because one person actually may be a supporter of another issue that's unrelated to that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought he's a comic book person. How can he believe this? And it doesn't make any sense. And then it's just ridiculous. It's a waste of time. My passion on this, and so hope that makes sense. And with that, I am going to jump off here. And so I hope this made sense. And if it didn't, I'm sorry. We'll do better next time. But if you like the content that I'm doing on this channel, please consider liking and subscribing, and where we take culture, TV, movies, and filter it right. I really appreciate your support. And with that, check out some videos I have up here as well. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later.